Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Sitting here late Thursday morning, and things seem to be moving rather quickly with Clemson and the defensive coordinator spot. A couple of days ago, we talked about Wes Goodwin and the future of him running this Clemson defense, and I think a lot of us felt the same way, and that is it's hard to see Wes Goodwin running this Clemson defense in 2025 after what happened in 2024. It sounds like Wes Goodwin's going to be on the move, and it sounds like Dabo Swinney is going to be hiring a new defensive coordinator. Now the conversation is, where's Clemson going to go? And I want to be very clear right off the rip here. I am certainly not an insider. Don't have insider sources. I am largely in the same position as many of y'all, and that is I'm just refreshing Twitter and I'm refreshing the Clemson message boards. And the name that I continue to see is defensive coordinator from Tennessee, Tim Banks. Right off the rip, I'll say this would be a home run smash hire for Clemson to take over the defense. And we're going to get into Tim Banks, but I want to start with why it was so obvious that I think you need to change at the defensive coordinator spot. And then more importantly, what should Clemson be looking for? Now, why it was so obvious, I mean, it's very clear that this Clemson defense, from a personnel standpoint, did not perform the way we expected. I mean, we talked about it a couple of days ago. You look at that roster for Clemson, what they're trotting out on defense, it's a lot of guys that are going to be playing in the NFL, and it didn't look like a defense that had a lot of NFL guys. You look at Andrew McCuba, goes to Texas, emerges as one of the best safeties that we see in the country. I think the most glaring result of the weekend was, 10 days ago, Clemson had no answers for this Texas rushing attack. Arizona State, they held Texas to 53 rushing yards. And this is not a hot take. Clemson's got better football players in the front seven than Arizona State. And so you start talking about the underperformance of Clemson. You start looking at, well, it probably has a little bit to do with how they're coached and what the defense scheme is. And I think that result you saw this weekend makes it even more obvious that it makes sense for Dabo Swinney to go in a different direction at the defensive coordinator spot. Now I want to get into what Clemson should be looking for, at least in my opinion. Talk about Tim Banks. Talk about another name that y'all threw in the comment section that stood out to me as well. Before we get into it, just want to say to the Clemson fans, it's been a roller coaster of a 2024 year, but it's been really fun talking this team, and there's been a ton of support from y'all in the comment section. Cannot thank you guys enough. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into what Clemson should be looking for. Now, from a style of defensive coordinator, I want to see this Clemson defense get back to dominating in the front seven. You look at how Clemson recruits and the amount of talent that they're able to compile specifically in the front seven of the defense. I want to get it back to this Clemson defense that's smothering teams, that's elite against the run, that has a ferocious pass rush. You got a kind of defense that I think Clemson can play with guys like TJ Parker and guys like Peter Woods and Sammy Brown. It should be a smothering unit. It just didn't seem like Wes Goodwin wanted it to be that kind of defense in the 2024 year. So from a style, I want to get back to more of an aggressive defense that really is affecting the quarterback and playing aggressive. Now, what should you be looking for in a defensive coordinator? To me, and I think a lot of Clemson fans probably agree with this, you want it to be an outside hire. Dabo Swinney's been known for hiring in-house and elevating his guys, which has worked for a while for Dabo Swinney. The problem with that Wes Goodwin hire was, okay, you might have liked him, but he was a green defensive coordinator, a guy that was kind of learning on the fly. In this era of college football, I don't think you can afford to have coordinators learn on the fly. There is so much that goes into running a college football program that you really can't have the head coach have that many hands in the pot, because he's worrying about the transfer portal. He's worried about the recruiting trail. He's worrying about NIL. I think in this era of college football, you want coordinators that you trust to do their job at a high level. And that's not saying Dabo Swinney can't have his hand in the pot on defense, but you don't want to have him babysitting at the defensive coordinator spot. You look at Tim Banks. This is a guy that's been around the block, defensive coordinator at Penn State. He goes over to Tennessee. And I think what you want to focus in when you're trying to sell Tim Banks to the Clemson fans, it starts with what Tim Banks has done with this Tennessee defense. The biggest misconception around this Tennessee football program is that it's a run and gun offense that's just going to win in shootouts. That's not the case with Tennessee anymore. Back in 2022 when Tim Banks just took over this Tennessee defense, that is how they were winning with Hendon Hooker because they just didn't have the dudes on defense to be elite in the SEC. Tim Banks has done two things at a phenomenal rate. One, the player development has been next level. I mean, there are a lot of guys on that Tennessee defense that are going to be NFL draft picks. He's getting football players better. But I think more importantly, the talent that he's acquired and built this program kind of from the ground up over on the high school ranks, that's what's most impressive for Tim Banks. He took over Tennessee defense. It clearly was outgunned in the SEC, and it slowly got better as he acquired the talent necessary. And then you go to the 2024 season. This was one of the more dominant defenses that we saw in the SEC. Only allowed 17 points per game. That was number 8 in the country. 4.5 yards per play. That's number 7 in the country. This is the stat that Clemson fans are going to love. 3 yards per carry, a top 5 rushing defense in the country. You also sacked the quarterback 7.5% of his dropbacks. That's the kind of Tennessee. That's the defense that we expect at Clemson. And we know they have the personnel to do so. And you talk about, all right, Tim Banks getting him from Tennessee to Clemson. It sounds like they're in a standoff with his contract regardless. It sounds like there's a very good chance that Tim Banks is going to wind up elsewhere in 2025, whether it's at Clemson, whether it's at Miami. And now you get into the conversation we had a couple of days ago, and that is it's got to be so easy to sell the defensive coordinator position at Clemson. You look at the defense you're going to be taking over. Guys like Peter Woods, TJ Parker, Sammy Brown at linebacker, Avian Terrell at corner. I mean, the amount of talent, especially the youth in the secondary, the amount of young talent in the secondary, that's only getting better. Combine that with what they have in the front seven in terms of pieces. I look at this Clemson defense and say, if you're Tim Banks, you're not stepping into a defense like you stepped in with Tennessee that you knew you had to rebuild. You're stepping into a defense that is ready-made to dominate in 2025. To me, I look at it and say that's why Clemson should be going after guys like Tim Banks, because they can. You want to go coach for Clemson, but you have the opportunity to coach a defense that's has every potential from a personnel standpoint to be elite. Now, another name, I'm a massive fan of Tim Banks, and we'll talk more about Tim Banks as more information comes out. Someone threw in Steve Wilkes in the comment section a couple days ago. I don't hate it. This was not a name that came to my mind when you started talking about defensive coordinator candidates. I'll tell you why I don't hate it. One, he's from Charlotte, North Carolina. We know that is the region where Clemson gets a lot of their high school talent, so that's certainly going to help on the recruiting trail. I think most importantly, he ain't a great head coach. He's done a really good job on the defensive side of the football. There is a track record. It's early on in the process, but there is a small sample size of NFL coaches moving down to the collegiate ranks, specifically on the defensive side of the football, and having a ton of success. You look at what Wink Martindale's done with Michigan this year. You look at what Danton Lynn did at UCLA and then USC this year. You look at Mike McDonald. You look at Jesse Minter. Steve Belichick at Washington did a really good job with Washington in 2024. There's a large sample size of guys that have spent a lot of time in the NFL coming to the collegiate ranks and really turning around defenses. And so Steve Wilkes, he certainly wasn't a name that came to my mind immediately. You combine with one, I believe in 2024 was a assistant at Charlotte. So he's not really employed right now. If he wants to get back into the game, this would be the spot for Steve Wilkes to do it. I think this wouldn't be that bad of a hire. A guy that has done it a long time in the NFL. Again, one of those guys that you can bring in. It's not a new defensive coordinator that's learning by the seat of his pants. He's grizzled. He's a grizzled vet calling defenses. That one would make a ton of sense too. I mean, obviously, Phil Parker at Iowa, Jim Leonard, the former Wisconsin DC. There's a bunch of good names, and I think that, to me, is what's so exciting for Clemson fans. Is I don't think there's too many coordinators that are off the table. If you are looking for a defensive coordinator job, this Clemson one's pretty damn attractive right now. We'll see how it turns out. Wanted to hop on, give my take around Tim Banks. Again, this is not me breaking any news. This is not me saying I have any inside information, because I don't. This is what I've seen, and this is kind of my thoughts on it. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. To the Clemson fans, it's been a blast. Y'all have shown a ton of support. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.